Arūnė Baronaitė. Arūnė is both visual artist and biotechnologist. She is master student at Vilnius Academy of Arts. So, and please, your presentation on Purvas.
Hello. So, everything perhaps began long before this research found its form at the Academy of Art, and even now it remains in motion, resistant, and a final shape. So, more than 15 years ago, sterile laboratory environments shaped both my imagination and perception, while laboratory lab, petri dishes, bacterial cultures, modified DNA sequences, chromatographic analysis, scientific language occupied much more space than art. Before turning towards photography and media art, I studied bioengineering and molecular biology. My early education revolved around genetic engineering, transformation, mutation, modification, and intervention. During laboratory practice at the Institute of Biochemistry, I worked with bacterial cultures, transformed grain systems, and experimented DNA sequences. Later, at the Ecology Institute, I practiced in lung cancer research. Cancer cells were injected into mice where their bodies were irritated, dissected, reduced into tissue samples, and analyzed chromatography. At that time, I did not yet know the terms posthumanism, new materialism, or angel realism. I did not yet have a language to describe anthropocentric epistemology or extractive scientific systems, but I remember very clearly that something in me resisted the logic of intervention and control. Life appeared there primarily as material to manipulate. The body became spaceman, a system, a resource, a system of experimentation. Only much later did I understood that my artistic practice emerged through a movement away from sterility towards unstable material relations, towards ecological grief, toward matter that cannot be fully controlled. Toward Purvas. My current master research began from the question, how to give a voice to the soil, or more precisely, how to listen when the soil is not treated as a passive ground beneath the human body, but as an active participant in thinking, sensing, and image-making. From this question, Purvas gradually emerged not only as a material, but as a methodological and epistemological condition. In Lithuanian, word Purvas means mud, dirt, that soil, you want to clean it. In this research, however, Purvas is approached as a condition of being and becoming. It is a dense, unstable field of relations, microbiological, mineral, moist decomposition. It is a site where bodies return, where boundaries soften, and where forms continuously break down and reconfigurate. To enter Purvas is to enter process already in motion. Reflection on mud gradually revealed the instability of its culture meaning. Mud is frequently associated with contamination, disorder, impurity, and waste. Marie Douglas famously defines dirt as a matter of a place, matter that crosses boundaries and disturbs systems of order. Taru Elfing recalls this definition in the context of contaminated land. Nothing how waste is culturally and historically specific, and how the distinction between waste, wasted, and wasteful are themselves unstable. And yet, people willingly immerse themselves into mud. In spa therapies and wellness culture, subpropel mud baths promises detoxification, mineral observation, improved circulation, bodily restoration, and healing. The same earth that elsewhere appears contaminated becomes therapeutic. This contradiction became center of my research. Mud exists within a fragile threshold between contaminated and cure, disgust and desire, toxicity and healing, waste and nourishment. Perhaps there is no stable distinction between good and bad mud. Perhaps there are only relations, context, and bodies that enter into them. This is why Purvas is not appreciated here simply as a substance. It becomes a site of tension between extraction and care, toxicity and therapy, ecological damage and bodily regeneration. The research draws a new materialism and a gentle realism in order to position analog photography as a process of interaction rather than a representation. Through soil chromatography, plant-based developers, mudgrams, and long-duration explores to humanity, bacteria, organic residues, and time, the image emerged through entanglement, material processes, and external human control. This framework, Purvas, is not a passive medium, but an active participant in interference with the image, staining, dissolving, and sometimes consuming it entirely. These processes are not treated as errors, but as manifestations of material agency, moments in which non-human forces reconfigure the conditions of visibility. This image is not only made, it happens. This also resonates with recent written of photographic unfixing, where Paulius Petraitis reminds us that photography has historically been shaped by the desire to make permanent what is impermanent. In my practice, this desire is reversed. The image is reopened by mud, bacteria, plant-based chemistry, and time. It is not fixed against decay, but allowed to become vulnerable to it. This is a deliberate return to matter, not as a passive substance, but as something that acts interrupts, stains, and transforms. This is where Karen Barot's notion of interaction becomes important. Interaction differs from interaction because it does not assume that separate entities exist first and then come into relation. Rather, entities emerge through relations. In the context of my work, the artist, the photographic surface, the soil, the bacteria, the humidity and the plant-based chemistry, and the time of exposure cannot be understood as fully separate elements. The image emerges through the entanglement. This is changes and the meaning of authorship. If the image is stained by mud, altered by bacteria, softened by humidity, interrupted by fungi, or consumed by decomposition, then the human author no longer stands or at the center of the work. Authorship becomes distributed. Image making becomes image becoming. This is why Purvas becomes methodology, not merely something represented, but a way of perceiving and knowing. Nothing exists independently here, not the image, not the body, not the soil, but the photographic surface. And here, Maria Plug de la Polet's statement becomes equally important. Here cannot be such a thing as an irrelevant background in the ecological worldview. For ecology, photography, this sentence is especially powerful. The background is never only background. The ground beneath the image, the soil that appears to support the sense, the organic matter that seems secondary, all become active. In an ecological worldview, there is no neutral ground, there is no silent matter, there is no empty surface waiting for artistic inspiration. Soil becomes active with bacteria, fungi, residues, moisture, industrial history, decomposition, and memory. Soil remembers. This also changes how experimentation itself can be understood. Experiments are not about discovery, but about listening and translating the knowledge of others. This marks a crucial distance from the laboratory environments that shaped my earlier education. Their experimentations was often structured around intervention, isolation, transform, mutate, measure. But in my current practice, experiment becomes a form of listening, not discovery of extraction, but experiment as attunement. Listen to the soil, listen to the bacterial time, listening to the chemistry of plants, listening to what appears only then control is loosened. Photographic surfaces are placed into direct contact with organic matter and allowed to undergo transformation. The practice employs soil chromatography. And in this case, you can see a mudgram. So the soil was directly having relationship with the photographic paper and made its image. The image is no longer fixed. It can become a trace, residue, and unstable, and often on the edge of disappearance. Ecological grief enters the work as a both emotional and material condition. Following Marietta Radomska, written on ecological grief and modern human death, grief can be understood as a way of attending to damaged world. Within this research, Purvas becomes a matter site of ecological grief, where loss is not represented symbolically, but entangled through decomposition, staining, and transformation, and the gradual disappearance of the photographic image. In this practice, grief is entangled through the image itself. Photographic surface decay, colors shift, emotional rapture molds, spreads, and image disappears. The image dies, not depict lost from distance. It undergoes it. It becomes vulnerable, understandable, and mortal. Haraway, written with Tom Van Duren, described extinction as a product showed death, and mourning as a way of learning of grief with. This is why failure is important. In conventional photographic practice, mold, stains, chemical instability, and disappearance might be understood as technical problems. In this practice, however, they become methodological openings. The relief of the activity of matter, expose the limits of control, and show the image is not closed object but a living and dying process. The body is also important in this process. Raffaello Ruffo writes, "We are part of Earth, not separated from it," and argues that to change our worldview, we need to change the way we perceive the world. Mud is not encountered abstractly. It is encountered bodily through skin, weight, humidity, temperature, resistance, smell, pressure. The body does not observe mud from a distance. It enters into material contact with it. This becomes especially important while thinking about mud baths again. Mud baths promise purification and bodily optimization. They promise detoxification, healing, restoring, yet they require immersion into decomposition itself. Compression, plant matter, mineral residue, organic decay. The body enters mud seeking healing, but in doing so encounters its own instability. Here Deleuze and Guattari concept of the body without organs becomes relevant. The body is no longer understood as a fixed organism or functional system, but as intensity, threshold, and unstable relation. The body is not simply given, it is made and unmade through process, context, pressures, and flows. Deleuze and Guattari wrote that the body without organs is not at all a notion of a concept, but a practice, a set of practices. Mud destabilizes the fantasy of the autonomous and controlled body. It reminds me that the body was never separated from the earth. The body itself is a tempered surface. It absorbs, leaks, responds, transforms, decays. This is where the spa mud bath and contamination soil meet a disturbing way. One processes healing and the other demands responsibility. But both reveal the bodies and grounds are porous. There is no sealed body or no sealed land. Elfting writes that toxicity is not only the fenced of land, but also the bodies of workers, residents, bodies and bodies of water, and more than human continuities of surrounding ecosystem. The work of detoxification, wherefore, was to be attended to all those affected. This becomes crucial for my understanding of Purvas. Detox cannot simply mean renewal. It cannot mean purification, because purity itself is impossible. As Anna Twing and others write, everyone carries a history of contamination. Purity is not an option. So the question shifts, not how do we clean the mud away, but how do we live with what has already entered us? Not how do we restore purity, but how do we become responsible within contamination? This is where Purvas returns to methodology. It does not offer purification. It asks for staying with impurity, with difficulty, with decomposition, with that cannot be newly separated. Harvey's phrase, staying with the tribe, becomes important here. In staying with the trouble, she writes with Anna Twing about collaborative survival in disturbance and contamination. For me, Purvas is one of these real reunion, contamination, but still generative sites, not a clean origin, not untouched nature, not romantic return or a compromised ground, a field of resilience, the place where decomposition becomes relevation. The contaminated land, it's not appreciated only as a problem to be solved. It becomes a site of listening, responsibility, and artistic research. Elfing writes that sometimes to be site allow the contamination land itself to act as a medium, a common ground between diverse modes of knowledge. This close relates to Purvas. Purvas acts like medium. It is, but not medium as a passive sense. It is common ground between photographic knowledge, ecological grief, bodily memory, bacterial time, plant chemistry, and material agency. In this sense, the work is not only about photography. It is about what photography can become, and when it no longer seeks to master matter, photography becomes a place where the human authors is displaced, where the image is co-produced by more than human forces, where material processes are not hidden but allowed to remain visible. The image is not representation of decay, it decays. The image is not illustration of ecological grief, it grieves materially. The image is not document of Purvas, it is with Purvas. This brings me back to the initial abstract of the research. Purvas is not a passive media, but an active participant. It interferes with the image, staining, dissolving, and sometimes consuming it internally. These practices are not treated as errors, but as manifestation of material agency, moments in which non-human forces reconfigure the condition of visibility. By working with Purvas, authorship is displaced. Image making becomes image becoming, a process of co-emergency where making and unmaking unhold situations, remaining close to dirt, decay, and more than human forces. To work with soil is not to represent the world, but to enter its decomposition. Purvas suggests not purification, but coexistence. Not separation from the earth, but immersion with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arūnė. And we have 1 minute for questions and comments. So please.
Thank you, Audra. It's an impression and question. I guess the opening photo is documentation from Roszczyn Action from 1987, and it's a Polish land art artist and a performer, and also guerrilla gardener Teresa Murak. Yeah. So I thought that it's important to say that this action was based on combining swamp with bread, yeast, yeah. And as a result was the bioform after 4 weeks. Yeah, it was in Lillehammer in 1987. So it's just wanted to say that Teresa Murak is also my mentor, and I'm a huge fan of her work and her goddesses art, let's say, actions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. More questions, comments? Marietta? You were mentioned.
No, I mean, I actually maybe don't have a formulated question, or a comment is, I think, first of all, maybe just for a background, we know each other from before, but I mean, I haven't really had a chance to listen to, like I knew about your background and about more or less what you are doing, but I think it's the first time I'm actually kind of encountering your work. So this is really fascinating to see, how things kind of shape, first of all. Also really fascinating to hear this take on soil chromatography, because I have worked with some folks, especially in Ås and in Oslo in Norway, who have been involved in state-of-the-art project, and there is a huge focus. So I mean, like, you know, if you want like soil connections apart from, you know, Jana Holmstedt that I mentioned, who is also into this as well, but there's also kind of a group really working on thinking with soil chromatographies, of course. But I mean, I think that this is very popular these days. I mean, you're very niche popularity, but popular. No, so I mean, it is really kind of fascinating, and I think because you invoked some of my work, I would like to actually go back maybe to this materiality of something as also a way of doing, because I mean, you know, as this kind of, and I think I had some notes, and especially this kind of becomes very tangible in the kind of, you know, conclusion part of your presentation, where you actually put the, you know, a big focus on something not being representation, but more like presentation, or rather a doing. And I'm thinking now, you know, also Robert Mitchell, who was kind of, you know, was of course a theorist working in different forms of art, but particularly his work on bioart. I mean, there is this, you know, a book from 2010, and I think his main argument is like, you know, it's important to think that it's not, you know, like in bioart, the very visible thing is not representation, but presentation and a kind of a doing. And I think, so there is also a connection to, I guess, you know, performance and performativity. But I was wondering if you would like to maybe elaborate a little bit more. I mean, like you said this already in the paper, but I mean, if you want to just kind of think a little bit out loud more, also as, you know, I don't know, a creator or and kind of, you know, one of the many agencies involved in this, you know, kind of multi-species process of creation and kind of performing, whether it's ecological grief or maybe something else, some sort of relationality, you know, that is not about purity, but actually kind of being entangled and staying in the trouble of this. So I don't know. Do you want to kind of pull out this thread and kind of say a few more words on that? So doing rather than representing, basically.
It's doing better than representing. It's
yeah, but I mean, do you want to say, you know, kind of, I don't know, like think out loud about, you know, whether I'm kind of torturing you with this, but
I can relate very much with the practice in my previous study, because to collect everything, but when you are doing those analyses and you are collecting the data from the animals and the chromosomes and enzymes, you only write it, and it's like packed in and stays in those big books about research, and nobody sees it. And when I started to study photography, the main thing is to show that data, to take this knowledge. This is why soil chromatography, because I did it in when I was studying. I did it with not only this way of soil chromatography is, I would say, the first soil chromatography, because when I was studying and working in a lab, we use machines, because they moved on and you only take a sample of soil, put it into a machine, and you get a data of it, and that's it. But when you see you get the view, and the soil chromatography is very, you never know what you will get, because you take a gray sand and you make this process and you get lots of different colors, and it's what's inside that soil. And if you do only laboratory chromatography, you will see only peaks and numbers, that's it. So I think all my research is how to make this data visible. And not to make it visible, like to show it, to perform it, but to not to play with it. Usually when people make ecological photos and everything, they make a one big photo. This is ecological crisis and this it. But when you're working in a laboratory, there is no feelings at all. It's like only data. And in this artistic research and visualization and performing it, you can make these emotions visible. How you connect expression, yeah.
Thank you very much, all the speakers.